Welcome back to another Director Q&A hosted by Wildscreen. Today I'm joined by Momme Halbe, producer and co-director of Before They Fall. Hello, Momme.
Hi, how's it going?
I'm good, thank you. So our official selection films hail from all across the world. Can I ask where you're joining us from today?
I'm joining from Wildscreen Territory, that's also known as British Columbia, and the city I'm in is Victoria.
Beautiful. So very close to the home and the heart of this film in British Columbia.
Exactly, yes.
So Before They Fall was included in our 2022 official selection. It's a 40-minute film focusing on Indigenous communities in British Columbia who are continuing to fight for their unceded land and provide a voice for these critically endangered old growth forests. Before we delve into the film and behind the scenes, I'd love to hear a bit more about you and what your experience is prior to this film, either as a producer or a writer.
Yeah, my career started about, it's probably like about 15 years ago in Berlin, back in Germany, where I'm from, originally from Kiel in the north. That's where, I got my first experiences, and I moved to Canada 12 years ago, got started here in a very exciting production company called Sherpa Cinema. Had amazing productions with them all over the world, and worked on some phenomenal projects that have shaped my career quite a bit. Still super grateful for those opportunities that I had with those guys. And then I worked in commercials and documentaries, some fiction films, but over the time I really wanted to focus on stories that mattered to me, which are nature-based, and so my career shifted more and more away from commercials towards documentaries and short stories like that.
Fantastic. And this is certainly one of those human-focused documentaries that is truly sort of impact-led, I would say. It's really looking at the heart of the conservation issue and making sure that's amplified through the film. So what actually sparked the idea for this film itself? Like, how did you get drawn to these people's story and their fight?
Yeah, it's a good question that we get a lot, because at the forefront it's sort of like this issue about old growth and trees, right? So that's the superficial storyline that is still super important, but what's underlying all of that is the land rights issue. And so we started this film last year, and it was a short film basically portraying a few people that are working in this field. And the short film didn't quite do it justice. So that's when I came in and I joined the company and I rewrote the script and said, we need to expand this and make the film really as big as it needs to be without any constrictions of film festivals or distribution, because we did our own distribution. So we had the freedom to make it any length we wanted it to be, and really wanted to make sure that the people get their voices heard and not be restricted by any time constraints there. And that was really sort of what started this conversation when we talked to Indigenous peoples directly and we heard their stories. We were like, this is not just about trees. We can't focus on the trees. Like, we can't repeat the stories that have been out there for decades. Like, we know this story because 85% of British Columbians already want to stop old growth logging. That's not the problem. The problem is, whose land is it? And so that's really what we wanted to focus on in this film. And even if it's not quite our story, because we were a white production team, we had to make sure that we open that door and that we can start this conversation that is so important to be had here in what's called Canada now.
Yeah, it's so important, and it's fantastic you had that freedom to sort of go with whatever length you felt you needed to provide opportunity for these people to actually speak their voice. And it's really interesting how you do kind of at first come into the film thinking it's going to focus on just the trees and kind of tree conservation, but as you keep watching, it pulls you in closer and closer, and you see how these trees are attached to spirits and to all of these people's connection to the land, and how important it is for our future as well. So it's like past, present, and future all within this ecosystem. But it's such a beautiful story, and it's such an important fight that I think it's it's really, yeah, really well woven into this narrative, and kind of the way it draws you in. Were you also working with Indigenous people behind the scenes? Did you kind of show them drafts of the film and like use their voices to help shape the edits?
Yeah, absolutely. That was one of our most one of the most important things to me was as a producer was to be inclusive. And I know that doesn't always work for the person that like say edits the film or directs the film, but like to me it was super important that we had inclusion and buy-in and trust with the people that we worked with. The participants in the film had a chance to review it. If they didn't have a chance, we talked it through. We discussed what do you want to talk about? Like, what is your story? Like, we wanted to make sure that we didn't put our lens on it and that we give up that control. Because like as white people, we've come into these places so many times and we take the story just like we take the resource. And that's to me is like, we as white people or settlers here on this land, we have taken the resources and we have taken knowledge and culture and have appropriated that so many times. And as filmmakers, there's no difference. If I come in, I can take the story, twist it, and put my lens on it. And then I'm doing the same thing that I'm criticizing in the film. So for us, it was important that we actually work with our participants closely, that they feel comfortable with us, that they trust us, and that actually like what they want out of this film is represented and not what we want out of this film. That to me was like the most important thing to really stress throughout production, is that we had, I think, close to 100 people reviewing it. We had 12 different revisions, and a broad range of people watching it and giving us feedback.
It's really good to hear how even sort of behind the scenes, all of the people and contributors you worked with had a voice and a say in how their story came across. I think it's kind of a continuing theme throughout the film, and the film itself, in a way, of art being a vessel for storytelling. And I think it's really beautiful. Obviously, you touch upon the photographer and how he's using his work to essentially raise awareness for these issues, but also to help put pressure on the industry and government. And you also see the artist as well, who creates these beautiful woodwork carvings. But then you as filmmakers have created this film that helps to share this story. I think that it's a really beautiful motif that was running through. Is that something that you intended?
I think it naturally evolved into that. We certainly wanted to make an artistic film that doesn't just, like certain themes like the lighting in the forest and the photography and the carving. Those were things that we wanted to showcase for sure, and we wanted to. But then elements within that, they just came sort of as an evolution within. And I think that's the beauty about art and filmmaking, is like you start a process, and then throughout the process you throw things out of the window and you bring new things in, and then you combine them, and that's when really sort of beautiful things come to light. I don't want to say magic, because it isn't really like a magic trick, but it's because it's work. You got to like, work really hard in the edit suite and find these little bits and pieces that you can put together and be like, oh, try this, try that, and how does that work? And then at the end you come up with something that works really well, because I think like there's a 80% probably in pre-production and scripting and trying to bring it together, but then 20% you leave up to that, like creativity in the edit suite, and let people try it out, and not everything worked, and we had to scratch a bunch of ideas, and then new ideas came up, and I think that's the beauty. Like we had I'm so grateful for the people that participated. Like Randy Cook is such an amazing artist and storyteller, and I think he really carries this film, and his messaging is so strong. Same as Rainbow Eyes, who also is like a fantastic storyteller, and they both have this ability to carry a film through, and that is what supports the art. Like then both, like there's still got to be a balance between that, right? Like you still got to have the strong storytelling elements, and you still got to have an artistic approach to make a film successful, in my mind.
Definitely, and I loved the that we kind of follow Rainbow Eyes through the film as well, and how she's involved in the different I guess moments of protest and kind of public speaking, but also you have this beautiful sort of one-on-one interview with her as she sat in the like surrounded by the beautiful forest, and she's just sharing her passion for conservation. And I think that's just a really beautiful way of connecting with the audience. I think having that one-on-one time too. How did you first meet all of these contributors? I know there's about 3 or 4 different people who.
Various ways, to be honest. The connection to Randy was sort of random through like our CEO here in the city, who sort of sold some wood. Randy wanted to buy it, and he actually gave it to Randy because it was wood from a longhouse that was torn down here at some point in the city. And so the connection with Suzanne was just reaching out to her and asking her for an interview. And that was during COVID. So we actually had to do a remote interview. My friend interviewed her in Nelson. We sort of like zoomed in just like we're doing right now. And we couldn't meet up. It was impossible to drive out there. Like the risk was too high. Rainbow Eyes, we met at Fairy Creek. Like we spent time out there, and we talked to Rainbow Eyes, and that was how we connected with her. And TJ Watt has been a photographer here on the coast for a very long time, and his work is acknowledged here, and he had a previous relationship with a company, and so that was a pretty natural connection right there. But yeah, it all came together. Like they all sort of flow in and out. And yeah, some of the other people that we met, like Katie and Siam, we met them through the protests, and that's spending time with them and talking with them and getting to know them.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I'm glad it all came together, because they are such important and strong storytellers, each in their own right, and it's great that you've woven all of their stories together in this film. I wanted to ask, when you set out to make this production, obviously you're dealing with a really sensitive issue. Obviously kind of these protests and protecting these critically endangered forests. Did you have any goals for the production's impact, either locally in British Columbia or internationally?
Yeah, I think internationally speaking, we wanted to raise awareness, because I don't think everybody's aware of what is going on here. Like people focus easily on the rainforest in the Amazon, which is as bad or worse than it is here, but it is the same issue. It is the same issue. The underlying issue is the same of Indigenous land rights. Canada has its own issues with that and the acknowledgement. I think we created this film last year when Canada learned a lot. Settler Canada learned a lot more about what the history of this country really was, with the publication of the graves at residential schools, and that was happening during our film, and that impacted the story as well, right? Like we had to, there was a shift in society, even though it's not quite there yet, but this is something that needs to be acknowledged. Like it was sort of like pushed to the side and be like, these stories are not true, but then the evidence came out, and people are slowly starting to understand that what they maybe learned in school wasn't quite what happened. And me being German, I can relate to that. We have a pretty bad history, and we sort of had to come to terms with that. And this is what is happening, in my mind, needs to happen here in North America, both in the US and frankly all across America. Like that goes to the South as well. There needs to be a reckoning with that past, and there need to be reparations, there need to be reconciliation, because I think they're so closely connected. Like we really got to make up for that past, and it's ongoing, right? Like this is an ongoing issue. Like this is not going away. Like what they've created, that system that they've created, allows that resource extraction right now. That's sort of what is going on. And so we want people to understand these connections, that the trees are connected to the Indian Act. The trees are connected to Indigenous peoples and to their land and to their rights that they've never given up.
I think what's really poignant as well, I think it was mentioned by the scientist contributor in your film, was that we need to stop seeing trees as individual trees. It's not just an issue of like chopping down a tree or saving one tree, but actually to view the trees from this new perspective of them being interconnected in a society, and how, you know, you've got these trees that are thousands of years old that have spanned generations of these Indigenous communities, and so much of our history is sort of tied into them, which is why they're so vital. Protecting them and the communities around them is so vital for the way forward. So it's really important that we do, as you said, get these stories out there, you know, to people outside of British Columbia, to raise awareness of these issues, because there are so many overlapping themes and problems that are affecting us globally.
Yeah, and there's nobody better equipped to lead us into these climate change solutions than Indigenous peoples, who have stewarded and managed these lands for time immemorial. That's just the reality that we have to acknowledge. They were the ones that kept this ecosystem thriving. Like when we look at old photos, like we see how big the trees were, how big the salmon were, how big the other animals were. They were bigger, and everything is shrinking down since colonization. That's something that we have to acknowledge, and we have to own as settlers. And we need to understand that we sometimes have to take a step back and be the ones start listening to Indigenous voices.
Definitely, and it's true even in sort of climate summits that we have, like at COP26. We need more Indigenous representation and presence, because there's just so much wisdom and knowledge there, and land stewardship that we need to continue into the future and not degrade further.
Exactly.
So yeah, I wanted to ask as well, how long did this production take for you to make, from, I guess, the initial idea to completion and submitting onto the festival circuit?
Yeah. Well, the actual production went from, I want to say, March last year, March 21, and then we finished editing in November, or like October, November 21. So about like 9 months in actual production. I would say the research and the interest and all of that goes into this film like started way earlier. Like my first sort of like crossing of this was reading a book in 2013, 2014 called The Golden Spruce that got me onto this track of like, whoa, there's a whole story here that doesn't really get talked about. And so like it's been a long time coming for me making this film. I wanted to make a film about old growth and logging here, but the way that the film evolved, I think that was really last year, the 9 months of production. And then we've been in festivals now for a year, and the film is now publicly available, and people can donate to a conservation society that will help to steward the lands again with Indigenous knowledge. And this is spearheaded by Randy Cook and his nation.
That's great to hear. So was that via the is that the ecologist platform? Where can people go to kind of support and find out more about?
Yeah, exactly. It's currently sitting on the ecologist website.
Okay.
So you go to ecologist with a Y, ecologist.com. You can find the film, and then you can also find the Winakula Foundation, which is the new foundation that is spearheaded right now by Randy Cook and some other people that were involved in the filmmaking. And so there's a long-term engagement there, and hopefully I can contribute to that as well in the future.
Great. Well, we'll have the links in the video description below, so anyone who wants to go and support the contributors in the film and their communities can read more and help donate if they're in a position to do so.
Awesome.
Moving on from Before They Fall, what's next for you? Are you kind of still working on stories that focus on a similar topic about Indigenous land rights, or are you doing anything else in the nature space?
Yeah, I'm back to independent productions, and I will continue to support Randy and the Momme Halbe and the Winakula Foundation on their endeavors. Like we filmed this year again up in his territory, where the clear cutting continues just as it did before, despite the deferrals, despite the promises from the government. Again, I will continue to do that work. I'm hoping that I can tell a range of stories, and I can work with a range of different directors and have the opportunity to diversify that and work on projects where we actually have Indigenous directors, Indigenous writers, and Indigenous editors. Or if it's a story that focuses on a different group, that I can hire a team that is from that group that we make this film about, so that we can get away from this old formula of white people coming in and telling the story. So if I can facilitate that as a producer, that's sort of like my goal forward. And I hope that the industry can shift towards that we understand that filmmaking has to change, not just the stories have to change. It's one thing to diversify the stories, but the storytellers need to be diverse as well and have that knowledge and cultural understanding to tell the stories in the right way. So if I can contribute to that, then that's hopefully my career forward.
Fantastic. So in terms of the natural history community, is there anyone who you've kind of mentioned, is there anyone you'd like to connect with? Are you particularly looking for directors in British Columbia to collaborate with?
I think there's a range. I think there's nothing specific there. What I would hope for is that we can really find, I want to call it like unconditional mentorships, that when Wildscreen or other film festivals can do workshops with people that maybe otherwise through other institutions don't have the opportunity, if they don't have the funding for film school, then how can we support communities that have historically been underfunded and have not had the opportunities to be mentored, to become the filmmaker or to become the storyteller. And I think that's where I would love to see some filmmakers come out and be like, hey, I'll donate my time. Like I've opened this door, I walk through the door and I keep it open, and I'll let other people walk through this door as well. If Wildscreen and other film festivals can do that to a diverse group of people and not just to the same old people that have walked through these doors and closed them behind them, that would be amazing. Like that would be fantastic. There's not individuals or anything that I would ask for, but it would be just if the film community as a whole could provide that and understand that would be amazing.
Well, that's great to hear that you're kind of interested in acting in a mentorship or a mentor role. Wildscreen do have an emerging talent mentorship scheme that we're, I think, currently piloting, and they're looking to roll it out internationally and to more and more communities in future. So hopefully one day we can get you on board as a mentor to help support some future.
I'd be honored to do that. Yeah.
Thank you. In terms of people maybe following your work and what you do next, what's the best way that they can do that? Do you have like a website or Instagram or social?
Yeah, I'm sort of rebranding right now. I will have my website up. It's probably going to be my first and last name. And also on Instagram, it's my first and last name, Momme Halbe. You can find me there. That is probably the easiest to connect with me. Yeah, and then you can follow the work that Ecologist does, ecologist.com, and then the Arwina Kyola Foundation as well, which I would recommend is a really good cause to get behind. They're doing fantastic work, and I think they will be able to provide sort of that mentorship and blueprint for other nations, for other people to protect their land in the future.
Fantastic. Yeah, any links we'll put in the description below so people can easily access them and continue to support these the campaign around Indigenous land rights in British Columbia, as well as following you and continuing your work. Awesome. But that's everything for me today. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Sorry, it's been really interesting learning more about behind the scenes and all of the work that you've done to help provide all of these contribute say and a voice in the film, and just continuing to raise awareness globally of this issue. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Before They Fall will be available on the Wildscreen Festival Film Library until the 16th of December. If you haven't yet got a virtual festival pass, you can do so via the video description below.